The most common misconception is that it's only used for something that I want, and everything else is someone else's fault. I'm not responsible for those other things, and it's only this tool I'm going to use. I had somebody tell me one day, like, "Oh yeah, I remember I used the law of attraction back in the '80s." I'm like, "Well, what happened?" It's like that's like saying I used the law of gravity back in the '80s. Then I stopped and I moved on to something else. It's like it's a universal law. It's either working all the time or it's not. It's not something I just decided it was a fact.
This is Leah Steele, aka The Wealth Witch, and this is my podcast. I'm here to activate you to remembrance of your divine birthright to be wealthy in all areas of your life. This podcast is for people ready to have controversial conversations about the financial control, manipulation, and tyranny that faces humanity today. I'm gonna live in freedom. The Wealth Witch. It's for the people who are ready to wake up, deconstruct their wealth programming, and free themselves from the financial slavery consciousness that serves the global financial agenda. I'm committed to realizing a new global wealth paradigm where economic freedom is the reality and where you get to design and live the life of your dreams. Now let's do the damn thing. Hey, and welcome to another episode of the Wealth Witch podcast. I am your host, Leah Steele, the Wealth Witch. And I am joined today by Mark Boldizar. Mark and I had the pleasure last week. No, not last week. I guess it's been a few weeks now. It seems like last week.
It does, yeah.
A few weeks ago, in early November, actually, to share the stage at the New Psychology of Winning tour that honored the mindset great Denis Waitley. And, it was an incredible sort of once in a lifetime opportunity. We shared the stage with people like Bob Proctor and Les Brown and Brian Tracy. And it really was just an incredible, very, very expansive experience. So Mark and I had connected actually prior to the tour and decided to have him on the podcast. He's got some fascinating ideas about the law of attraction, and is a author of an incredible book called Unleash Your Future. So Mark, I'm so happy to have you here. I think, one of the things that you are best known for is making the complex simple. And I love that because, especially as we get into talking about things like law of attraction and metaphysics in general, and, the quantum realm and manifestation, like so much of the science or the information that backs this thought and philosophy is really difficult to understand. So I'm excited to have you here because I know that you're a very results and measurement oriented person. And I think that this is going to be an incredible opportunity to share with my listeners some of your theories and ways that you actually help people tap into these fields of awareness and manifest from, not only the metaphysical, but also, using science and reason and logic. So welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Leah. Thanks for having me here. And it's time flies. It does seem like only a week or so ago when we were on the New Psychology of Winning tour. This is going to be fun because I really like your approach and what you put out there around individuals really utilizing their inherent power to free themselves from paradigms and to take responsibility for where they're going and to take action. And really, I'm about the same thing, right? We all have this creative power that I come to it both from a metaphysical, but I lead my lead languages. I lead from the science side to mix together to just figure out. And I've done this my entire life from the time I was little, always wanting to figure out how things worked, and not only how they work, but how to make them practical And that's really making the complex simple, no matter what the concept is in any business, life, whatever. If it can't be boiled down to becoming practical, then it's, I say, like, theory is useless, right? It's in a book somewhere, whatever that theory is, metaphysical. It has to be able to be boiled down to practice for you or me or anyone else to get value from it.
Yeah. And one of the things I love about, your position sort of on the world and the work that you do is that you are really dedicated to helping younger people tap into this work. And I'm such an advocate for teaching wealth consciousness to our next generation, because they really are the ones that are going to create the transformation on this planet. And so I love that, that you make that a priority, and, that you have this kind of theory around, like, not everybody has to go through this like hard knock life or learn tough lessons if we educate our kids properly. So I'd love for you to share a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's been a passion of mine. I have two daughters who are both in college now, 18 and 20. And when I've started, I would talk to them about this from the time they were little. And I would say these things. And when they were younger, they'd be, "Oh, Dad, you're not going to tell me about this spiritual thing or this law of attraction thing." But now, as they've gotten older, they're much more interested in, particularly my 20-year-old, where she's there, there's so many people who, her friends and college, and even her professor. She said one day, she calls me and said, "Dad, I was in my psychology class, and the professor was bringing up the law of attraction, but really bringing up in a disparaging way. And I actually stood up and I raised my hand and told him, well, there's a lot more to this than kind of this thing out there that you think is just kind of a hokey thing that's not real." And so I was proud of that. And so what's happening is there's this absorption that younger people are resonating to this law of attraction, and they're really inquisitive. But they're meeting it at a place where there's a lot of misinformation or not incomplete information. So they don't really know how to grasp it. So if my thought is, if you can take them to the place where they can understand it, just like anything else, and then start to apply it in life. And as you say, they're the next generation. And if they can learn now, like it took me 50 some years to get to the point where I am now, of kind of thinking that there was something there, but really having to do all the work. And when I set out to change my life with the law of attraction, I also had in mind that I was going to do it in a way that I could figure it out to show and teach others. And that's really the root of the book, was all about that. And I love, I have many, like, if I see people that I think, hey, I think, you might like this book, go ahead and read it. And I've given it to a lot of my daughter's friends just to get that out. And that's the place. Some people, they're more open-minded at this phase too, and they'll have more benefit from it. It's my passion. Now, some people say, well, that's not really, if you're doing this as a business, that might not be the place to focus, but I'm here for service. I figure the business comes on its own.
Well, I think that's if you're truly living a life that's aligned with the law of attraction, I don't know that you can be anything other than living a life of service. I think that those things go hand in hand. So actually, on that note, let's just dive into the good stuff. I want to talk about law of attraction with you because as my audience knows, I'm quite outspoken about the love and light side of the law of attraction. I am, absolutely a believer that we are the most powerful creators in our reality. And I actually am a believer in the law of attraction, but I think that often we leave out some of the most important parts of understanding universal law, which is what I really believe that the law of attraction is. It's simply a universal law. And we forget to talk about that we just as easily attract things that we don't want into our life as we do things that we do want. And that the law of attraction isn't simply just sitting around thinking about the thing that you want to create in your life and then it just magically appears. So I know that this is something that you love to talk about. And I know that you actually have taken the law of attraction and been able to break it down into ways that you can actually achieve measurable results using the law of attraction. So I would love to hear your thoughts, your theories, your beliefs on the law of attraction. And let's just dive into this conversation, which I think potentially could be a little controversial for some of the love and lighters out in the world.
It could be, because I would start out by saying, I wrote a book about the law of attraction, but I don't think the law of attraction really works by attraction, right? It's one of the first things that struck me about the law when I read books like Think and Grow Rich and watched the movie The Secret and As a Man Thinketh, all of these great books, The Science of Mind by Ernest Holmes. I intuitively felt like there was something here that was real, or at the very least plausible, but like attracting like didn't make any sense to me, because as a scientist, that's not how it works in the universe. Opposites attract. If you take, and I have a couple magnets here, but they're across the room. If you take like poles of a magnet, south, south, north, north, you won't get them to stick together. You take a north and a south and they'll go right together. So I think that, while I will say law of attraction, I say that because that's what people know it as. But then I immediately like to move it to the universal law of creation. And really, I see the law as more of a transformation of energy versus an attraction, because attraction also feels passive to me. It's one of the big knocks on the law of attraction. People say, oh, yeah, you just sit there and you think about something and you just attract it. It has this, it can feel passive, but it's not. It's really a law of action as well. So from a transformative stage, we see transformation of energy all the time in our lives. Electricity is a great example. When you flick the switch on to turn a light on, that's that energy that creates that electricity in your home starts as some other form of energy. Could be wind energy, could be solar energy, could be nuclear energy. And there's this very prescriptive scientific process that transforms it. I see the law of attraction the same way. We program the law of attraction, this universal law, and it has to be universal. A law can't be, well, it's a sometimes thing. I'm only using it when I want this thing, right? So that's where personal responsibility comes in. You're responsible for everything. The law is, as you were saying, it doesn't care. It's impersonal. It just gives you what you're telling it. If you sit around worried about an experience of, you're really charging it up. And this gets at the three components that I've broken down to. It's not just thought. There are three components. It's this thought of what you're focused on, right? And if you're intentional, you're intentionally thinking you want to create something. And then the personal belief on whether you believe that experience is personally possible for you, because you can't manifest what you don't believe is possible for you. And then the passion or energy that you have for it. And often the greatest passion and energy you have for something is something we don't want. And we think, I don't want this. I don't want this. Well, I talk about, there's a concept in math, absolute value, -10, +10 are both 10. So the law works in the same way. It doesn't care. It doesn't see the I don't want. It just sees the passion and energy. If you say, I don't want to lose my job, or I don't want to have this crappy relationship, you're just playing in your mind, losing your job and saying, I don't want that. And the universe forgets that. Or I don't want this relationship, but the universe forgets that I don't want part. So when you understand the rules of the game, then you can then step back and look at, well, what's going on in my head? What am I telling the universe that I might not even be aware of?
I talk about this a lot with my clients and on this podcast about minding your mind, how important it is to mind your mind. And that does require that we have radical self-responsibility for our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions. I love to talk about the word abracadabra because it literally translates as I speak, I create. And for me, it's like, I take that one step further, because I think, and using the word think, it's like, as I think, I create, like literally as I think, I create. And when we recognize and realize how powerful we are as creators, and that, what we resist persists and what we focus on persists, it's, and that's the piece I think that's really difficult for people to understand. And I also think it's why the law of attraction gets such a bad rap, because most people are looking at it as, oh, you just sit around thinking about all the things that you want, and then suddenly they manifest in your life, which isn't necessarily the case. But I love the universal law of creation, because I'm always talking about how you're the most powerful creator in your reality. And that's why you have to mind your mind. So I actually really love that. And I'm totally adopting that from now on, because I actually hate the law of attraction, the term, the law of attraction, because of everything it represents in the spiritual and non-spiritual community. And I think there's a lot of bypassing that comes along with our belief in that particular universal law. So I feel like everyone should adopt the universal law of creation.
I love it. I think it's like we start a movement here to kind of a new terminology. And one of the things that I think has been interesting is that as I talk more about this, then I'll have another law that people will talk about. Well, they'll bring in the law of resonance, and that the law of resonance is, well, then, and I think it's just another way of trying to explain like how this attraction works, which I think it's an attempt to get past this first part where, okay, this doesn't make sense from an attraction, but this resonance bit of, well, if you're vibrating at your thoughts at a certain frequency, then other things will come in and they'll vibrate, and then this likeness will occur. And I'm thinking, well, if that's the case, well, they're both the same. So it's not going to be seen if my thoughts are unseen, this other part. So then I go to very simple thinking about energy and frequency of how this transformation occurs. So if you think of water, right? Water in its liquid form, it's H2O. Water in ice form is H2O. Water in vapor is H2O. But the molecules they're vibrating at different frequencies. In the vapor that you can't see, like your thoughts, they're vibrating really, really, really fast. And then they slow down and it gets to water, then liquid, and then you slow down more and they go to ice. So I think about our thoughts, these programs that we program, vibrating really fast so they can't be seen. And then we program the law, and the law works them down like we work vapor to water to liquid water to ice. It use all the things in the universe to slow the molecules down into the physical experiences. Now, we don't have to, I'm not here to have a science lecture, because at the end of the day, how that all happens up there, I don't really spend a lot of time thinking about it. I'm interested in looking at what the research people are doing. But at the end of the day, for me to create, or you to create, or anyone who's listening to create, you don't need to know how all that part works. You just need to know what your role is. Then it is the program. And if you become responsible and intentional with your mind, weed the garden of all the stuff, that's in there that you don't want, you will become the much more productive, successful manifester of the things you want. Because what you have to know is you're already a master manifester. Everything that's happening in your life, you're manifesting. So if you say, well, I can't manifest, you manifest everything that's occurring, whether you want it or not. So you're already a master manifester. It's just all a matter of now doing it intentionally.
Yeah, I love that. That's so aligned, because I literally was just doing a training in one of my programs this week, and I was using those exact words. You are already a master manifester. Every single thing that exists in your life, you have manifested, good or bad. Yeah. And so I love how you talk about being the programmer. Like, you're literally the programmer, right? So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting is if you roll back in time and move forward, all these things that way back that used to be science fiction are now science fact. We see these things. So the example that I use now as how the law of attraction works are 3D printers. So are you familiar with 3D printers? Basically, instead of printing on paper, they print, and they'll take an amorphous string of material, and meld it. And whatever you design, it could be they're actually building houses this way today, where they're printing houses. It's used to print intricate parts. Anything under the sun that you can design and put in a computer, the printer will print. The law of attraction is the same way. You're the designer, the programmer. You're programming with your thoughts, your belief, and the energy of that. And you're sending these programs to the universe. Now, if you're random and not really paying attention, you're sending a lot of different programs to the universe. Probably the ones that are biggest are the ones that you're running your old programs, right? Your fears, the things, your loops, your Groundhog Day loops that just keep occurring. That's what you're programming. But nonetheless, it's, I have something here that I like to use as the example, and it's a floppy disk. Right now, how many people remember the floppy disk that you just used to put in a computer? This is how I think of programming the universe, except it's a triangle. So it's like triangular program. I'm just slotting it into the universal law of creation, and it's going to do whatever I put on that program.
So tell us about that process. So how do you program the triangular floppy disk?
Well, the first step is to take a look at in your mind, what's going on. So I'll say, take the top 3, 4, 5, 6 things. And maybe some of them are driven by a really intense feeling, and put them on paper. What's the thought? What's the feeling? It could be an emotion. And what's your belief about whatever that is happening? And what you're going to find is there are going to be some of those that you don't want. And for some people, everything that they just put down may be something they don't want. And you can score each one of those sides on a simple scale of 1 to 10. So how strong, how often do you have this thought of this experience you want? How strong is your belief that it'll happen for you? And how strong is your energy, right? So the maximum, if you score them 1 to 10 on each side, you multiply 10 times 10 times 10 would be 1,000. And that would be like, you're doing nothing other. So it's probably not that. So you'll have a combination of numbers. You might get numbers that are low, 100, maybe you get some that are 200 or 300. And then you just compare these thoughts that are in your head. The biggest ones are and then if you drew them to scale, those are the ones the universe are going to see first. I have this analogy of puzzle pieces. If you just had a bag of puzzle pieces, gave it to someone, and you've had a bunch of small pieces that were all the same, they'd reach in there. How would you know how to pick the one out that you want? But if you man, I really want this, and you had really big puzzle pieces in there, like those kids' puzzles that had the handles on, 4 pieces, you tell the universe that, it picks it and pulls them together. That's what it's the mindset of when you look at the strength of your programs. But the first step is just awareness. Before you can move to really becoming, focused and intentional, first be aware of what your current state is, what's happening in your mind, and not to give yourself some grace too. Don't be oh man, this is so horrible. I'm doing so this. I think the part about responsibility, people then want to blame themselves. Oh, I'm going to blame and no, it's not about that. It's it's just about knowing that what you didn't know before. Don't take responsibility as blame. Just take it as hope for the future, because now I can change it.
Yeah. So what do you think the most common misconceptions about the law of attraction are?
The most common misconception is that it's only used for something that I want, and everything else is someone else's fault. I'm not responsible for those other things, and it's only this tool I'm going to use. I had somebody tell me one day, oh yeah, I remember I used the law of attraction back in the 80s. I'm well, what happened? It's that's like saying I used the law of gravity back in the 80s. Then I stopped and I moved on to something else. It's it's a universal law. It's either working all the time or it's not. It's not something I just decided it was a fact, right? And I think that's, and because of that, there's just tons out there on TikTok everywhere, these really gimmicky things that are about that piece. Here's this, do this, stand on your head and touch your nose and do this certain thing, and then it's sure to manifest something. It it makes it gimmicky, and then people see it as that, almost like it's a misunderstood kind of magic, right? It feels like magic. So I get like why people, but magic when you is something that looks to be supernatural, right? But once you understand how this thing really works and you see like it's not extraordinary and supernatural, it's just your power. It may be scary, but it's not just a sometimes thing.
Yeah, so let's talk about the personal responsibility piece, because that's, I think, the piece that's missing most from this conversation. So let's talk about your views on how personal responsibility plays a role in the universal law of creation.
Well, personal responsibility is the way you move from this victimhood to taking control of your creative power. Because whether you want to take responsibility for it or not, it's the way it's happening. And I think there's this struggle in people. And it's why in the beginning of the book, one of the first things in the book are about the 5 stages of grief, because you have to go through the grieving process that I can no longer be a victim, right? And people can stay in a grieving process for a long time and never get to acceptance, right? So to move from this, it's like, oh, because even sometimes I think, man, wouldn't it be easier if I was just back in those days where I just wasn't like, I just lived like everybody else. And then it's short-lived and I move on and say, no, wouldn't be. But, it's because it's harder work. You have to pay attention to your thoughts. You have to pay attention to your actions. You have to pay attention to your words. And that takes a lot of energy. But then I'd say, but it also takes an awful lot of energy to struggle against the current and do all these things. But when it's familiar, if swimming against the current and being a victim and all that is familiar, that energy doesn't feel as tiresome to the individual as the energy of taking responsibility. And I've seen this on almost every science principle I've taught, where people, you'll show them this is how it works. It's like, yeah, but I want to do it this way. Okay, but if you do it that way, you won't get this, but I want to keep trying. And that's the definition of insanity. And so I have not found one particular way that reaches everybody. There's these light bulb moments, and I think oftentimes you see it in people's lives when they've hit some kind of low point or traumatic experience where, okay, now I've had enough, right? Really what I wanted to do with the book is say, boy, it would be so much better if you could get on this train before you hit that point in life, right?
Yeah, I mean, we frequently experience growth and expansion, or even, what I think most spiritual people refer to as a spiritual awakening on the heels of massive trauma. And so, but I also believe that that's a large part of the human experience. We have, for whatever reason, chosen that growth and expansion comes from pain, struggle, and trauma. We make those associations. And so I think the true work of this lifetime is to move past that and then step into that. We don't actually have to live in that victim perpetrator mentality. And I think that that's a very difficult thing for people to wrap their head around and understand, because we have been programmed and conditioned to believe that there's only really one reality. And that is, you're either a victim or you're a perpetrator. And most people cannot embrace the thought of being the perpetrator. And so as a result, they fall primarily into victim mentality. And then my life is happening to me. And so, that to me is, when we talk about self-responsibility and self-accountability, it is embracing that you are the perpetrator and you are the victim, and you also get to choose out of that cycle. And through radical self-responsibility and accountability, we can then decide that life doesn't have to be growth and expansion through a series of trauma and struggle. We get to actually opt into growth and expansion through thriving.
Absolutely. And it, as you say, it starts with a choice. That choice is to, you can either be reactive and you can be the victim and you can continue to be there and talk about wanting to have a different experience, but keep doing the same things. You can do that hoping for another result, but it's not going to occur that way. And I think there's one of the laws of thermodynamics, I think, stands in the way of this particular leap from victimhood to responsibility. And it's called the law of entropy. It's the second law of thermodynamics, which states that first law has to do that everything's energy. The second law, it states that a system, people are systems, groups are, always seeks to be in its lowest energy state. So it wants to expend the least amount of energy. So no matter how bad it is, no matter what the victimhood is, it's easier to play the role that I know than to do the work and to expend that energy. And I call this second law, in a simple way to explain it, the law of Legos. So if you think about the Lego building blocks, the lowest energy state for those Legos is to be scattered all over the floor. So how long does it take you to dump a whole box of Legos all over the floor? Almost no time at all, and they're completely scattered. Now, anybody who has children who had to put away toys or put away those Lego blocks, do they ever want to go pick them up and put them away? No, because it takes energy to organize them again. Now, even then, if you want to build something with them, right, build a tower, or it could take hours, days, weeks to organize those. And that's what's happening in our life. So if we could just think about it and say, okay, yes, it's going to take this energy, but it won't last forever. Once you make the change, then you'll be able to, I look at this, everything's a bit of a, you put the energy in, then you can plateau, you're at a new state, then you build again, then you move to a new state. All that's the process. But that bit of wanting to get out of this lowest energy state, I think it's wired into the universe to make it hard.
Hold on one second. My cat is scratching at the door. And I'm like, he's not going to stop until I let him in. Okay, come in. He's like a dog, but he just scratches away. Okay.
I know. I have a cat like that as well. So I have two doors on the other side, so he can't get to the one that's closest to me.
Okay, so where do we want to take this from here?
So as I said, so in the universe, people, I'll hear this a lot. People say, oh, the universe is conspiring for your good. The universe is not conspiring for you or against you. The universe is there and it's impersonal. But when you understand how it works, you can make it work for you, right? But when we personify this thought, right, it's almost like, well, it's always working for me. But then so many people, if they aren't getting what they want, think, oh, the universe is against me. No, the universe is not against you, right? So if anybody's thinking that, you can change that today and reprogram that today if you choose. And I tried to make it as easy as possible to understand it in another way with some components so you could break that down so that it wasn't this one big thing. Oh, I got to go manifest something. Well, how do I do that? Well, start where maybe, a lot of times it's this personal belief. So many people don't feel like that they believe that everything's possible for them. Only certain things are. And so you can just stretch your way a little bit of time to broaden that out.
Yeah. I think that it's interesting because I talk about this, the universe is constantly conspiring in your favor when you are. Yes.
You're the one who's making that happen, right? It's there and it feels when you're in resonance, when you're in sync with it and you're using it intentionally, that's exactly how it should feel, right? But the opposite is not true. When it's feeling like it's against you, it's not against you. You're driving the bus either direction.
So Tell me what you think about synchronicities then. I'm interested to know from your perspective, what are synchronicities? Why do they show up? What are they?
I see this as information's flowing at all levels, right? So down in our 3D level, we have book knowledge and information, and we just keep going up and, with these intuitive realms and our spirit guides and all this, and there's just information flowing at all levels, right? And I think synchronicities, they're up in this level where if you're aware, sometimes, it could be an intuitive hit or you feel something. It's our sensors picking up on these other levels of information that are flowing, that oftentimes, unless we're intentional or we've worked to develop it, we're not aware of. We only see that this level down here. So these things then that occur where we're picking up information in the unseen realm, it feels like, oh, that's weird. Oh man, how could that? It's like, no, it's like, so we can all be emitting information at different frequencies, right? I can hear you, I can see you right now, but there are other bits, our thoughts, if they're going out into the universe, they're out there unseen, and so are everyone else's. So I see synchronicities where we're interconnecting and we become aware of a connection. So for me, this unseen realm, like I've really worked over the last few years to really develop that intuitive side and my connection with my spirit guides. And there's a lot of information that comes in, and I make a lot of decisions, not just on what I can feel physically, right? Because if you do that, you miss this whole other area. I rely a lot on information I pull in from the unseen realm as well.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about, you have an incredible summit coming up that you are hosting with Isabel Fagan called the Mind Acceleration Summit. And I'm super honored that you've asked me to come and speak at that. And I'm really looking forward to that. That's going to be on December 6th. And we will put some information in the show notes about how you can register for that. It's a free summit. It's going to be really, really incredible. But tell us a little bit about the inspiration behind that and what the Mind Acceleration Summit is about.
Yeah, one of the things that, when you start to talk about the law of attraction and those that are interested and are really working on manifesting with the law of attraction, almost inevitably, the next thing that comes up is how can I do this faster, right? And that's what I think drives a lot of what you see out on the internet around this get rich quick or manifest this quick by doing this particular thing. But I think those are shortcuts that don't work. So I wanted to think, well, there are ways to go faster under control, and there are other universal laws. There are two other universal laws that, when you combine and integrate your effort and you get those in sync, you move faster. And I'll talk about one of those laws is the law of change, right? So change, the one constant in life is change. And there's a formula for how change occurs. And it was, I took this original formula that was developed in the business consulting world back in the 60s. And I've applied it to, it's like, that's kind of a universal bit on change. And so by having an equation of how change occurs, you now can break change down into smaller bites and see where you may need to be doing some more work if there's a change that you're trying to manifesting by definition is almost creating a change, right? It's something that I don't have today. So by definition, it's a change. So the law of change makes perfect sense to be one of those laws that if you integrate versus, I'm only focused over here, and the law of change has some other components, and this other law over here has some other components. If I try to manage them all independently, one, I'm duplicating effort, and two, I'm missing out on the power of synergizing them all together. And you bring them all together, you take off. It's like go from walking to like moving at the speed of light. but that's more under control than, hey, I'm going to try to shortcut over here and do this thing and get this manifestation faster. In which case, one, it's likely not to work, and two, even if you get a little result, it won't be sustainable or repeatable for you. So when you do this mind acceleration and tap into the mind acceleration effect, it's repeatable and it's sustainable, the results you get, because you're doing it the way that it works, not by taking a shortcut.
Amazing. So it's a one-day event, correct?
Yes.
Happening on December 6th. And we'll put the information in the show notes of how you register. I think it starts somewhere around 8 a.m. Pacific time, if I'm correct.
Yes, 8 Pacific to 2 or 3 Pacific. So it's 6 hours, 6 or 7 hours. And it's really going to be starting with a lot of we talked about here today. Evaluate, really know where you're at and where you want to go. So that part, to initiating action, which ultimately, and engaging these laws to engage the mind acceleration effects so that you elevate your life experience, right? So it's going from reluctantly reactive to productively proactive, right? Really, how do you unleash that best future so that, and there's going to be a lot of different perspectives there. So the conversation we're having multiplied by 10 or 15 other people all coming in together to share. So I think I'm really excited about the different perspectives. I come with kind of a different, new and innovative perspective on this, but everybody who will be there to summit, like yourself, all have a passion that all blends together. I don't see in this world that there's a right or wrong way to be looking at these things. They're different sides of the sphere, and that we are all looking in. And when we're all looking at, if we can bring the sphere smaller, we unify. And through the unified approach, everybody wins.
I love that. Well, we're going to wrap the traditional part of the podcast here. I have something really exciting to announce, and that is that I'm going to be launching a Wealth Witch podcast premium subscription, and it will be part of my new collaboration with the Wild Network. And so as part of that, I will be doing extended shows with people like Mark, where they actually come in and do a teaching segment of the show. And so Mark is actually the first guest to do this. And so we're going to end the Wealth Witch podcast, the traditional audio streaming portion of the podcast here. Definitely check out Mark on all social media. We're putting links to his book. We're putting links to the Mind Acceleration Summit in the show notes. And stay tuned for the launch of the Wealth Witch Premium subscription, because you're definitely going to want to come in and participate and hear this next bit that I'm going to record with Mark, where he's actually teaching us practical ways to measure and get results using this universal law of creation. So Mark, we're going to end the show here, and then you and I are going to carry on for the Wealth Witch Premium segment. But thank you so much for being here and all of this incredible and valuable information. And if you want more of this, you're definitely going to want to sign up for the summit.
Yes, thanks for having me, Leah. This has been fun. I could stay up all night talking about these kind of things. It's very energetic. So I appreciate the time and the dialogue. And hopefully this exchange of ideas helps everybody who's listened.
Yeah, amazing. That's a wrap. I hope you enjoyed the show. Make sure to connect with me on social media and reach out. I love hearing from you. And if you want more of me, real, raw, and uncensored, make sure to join the Wealth Witch Telegram channel. It's my free channel where I share all of my random daily musings as well as the information that I feel like is important and pertinent to my community. We've put a link to the Telegram channel in the show notes, so make sure to come join us over there if that intrigues you. Remember, wealth is a mindset, and you are the most powerful creator in your reality. Until next time, this is the Wealth Witch signing off.